In the late 1700s, voting was controlled by the state legislators. The only people allowed to vote were white men over 21. Later, when the U.S. Constitution was ratified, Native Americans were not considered U.S. citizens, therefore couldn't vote. Native Americans fought for the right to be citizens and to vote on U.S. matters. I believe that everyone should vote because it took too much sacrifice for this minority group to have their voices heard in politics after hundreds of years of barricades.
Native Americans have merely been pawns in America's expansion and imperialism. They were used when convenient and then disposed of after they served their purpose. We can see just how disposable Native American lives were to the government when looking at the horrific event from the 1830s Trail of Tears, where thousands of Native Americans were forced off their land and left to die on the brutal journey. Even 30 years later, when the 14th Amendment granted citizenship for African Americans, the American government stressed the fact that it did not extend that liberty to Indian savages, in the words of Michigan Senator Jacob Howard at the time. The only possible way to be granted citizenship as an indigenous person was to cut ties with any tribal affiliations. This then led to the opening of boarding schools that aimed to assimilate and neutralize the Native American people to colonial standards.
The Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, known as the Snyder Act, gave the right to Native American citizenship but not completely to voting rights. Through the 14th Amendment, the U.S. shall grant citizenship law for all people born in the country and naturalized. They were not allowed to vote for how much political power it would give them to make a better present and future for themselves. Because of this, I choose to vote for the people who need a voice. I choose to vote against all the injustices that are being presented to minority groups.
I believe everybody in America should vote. Why, you may ask? Because thousands of people fought for this right. Thousands of people didn't have the right to express what they believe was better for America. One of those thousands of people were Native Americans, who didn't have the right to vote because of who they were and what they believed in. In 1930, many Americans didn't want Native Americans voting in their states. Also, not all Native Americans' votes were secure until 1960. They fought every state to let them vote. They fought for their rights. That's why I believe everybody should vote so we can make worth what they fought for.
Voting today has changed over the years dramatically, but I still believe that some minority groups have their views and voices suppressed to this day. During the 2018 midterm elections, over 5,000 Native Americans elected basic necessary information of a 90 to vote. Now moving on to the 2020, the Ballot Interference Prevention Act worsened these barriers for many rural Native Americans that are now facing and voting again. With this act in place, they're neglecting Native Americans with the basic right to vote.